Hello and welcome to this special edition of EdTech Mondays Africa. On this edition, we're coming to you from Ghana's capital, Accra. And as you can see, we are at the Kwame Nkrumah Memorial Park. Why are we here, you might ask? Well, we're here for the 2025 ADEA Triennale that is bringing together Africa's education leaders and development partners to shape the future of learning on the continent. Across Ghana, access to basic education is expanding fast, but quality and equity still pull in different directions. In the north, one trained teacher can face more than 50 pupils, while urban classrooms run at half that size. Although internet use is rising, rural learners still trail behind their peers. The focus is practical use of data to guide decisions, build the capacity of teachers and school leaders, as well as hardwire inclusion so no learner is left behind. Here at the ADEA Triennale, it's all about delivery, from funding to accountability and to holding ministries of education and other educational leaders accountable for the kind of education ecosystem that we are putting in place. As we all know, Africa is going to shape the workforce in the future. But how are we laying the foundation for this to happen? 25 years from today, 100 years from today, that work all starts today. So come with us, let's take a look at the highlights from the ADEA Triennale.
We have the opportunity to assess what has worked in Africa's education systems, identify the gaps, and explore what we can do differently to improve quality and relevance. We believe that the time has come for Africa to rely more on her resources to solve her problems. We are being challenged by current circumstances to explore indigenous financing strategies that respond to national needs. We are blessed not only with rich mineral wealth, but also with intelligent, creative youth whose talent can drive Africa's transformation when we take better care of these natural resources and human resources too.
Is Africa ready? And is Africa ready for the future? When Africa is still grappling with congested classrooms, shortage of teachers, lack of infrastructure to support and speed up digital, inclusive, equitable, quality education, I'm certain that with your presence in this room, we will find answers to many of these questions.
We are meeting for a reason. We are meeting because we need to fix education. Whether we talk about financing, whether we talk about curriculum, whether we talk about integrating technology, whether we talk about teacher professional development or school leadership or data, might speak, as some of us keep saying. All these are meant for a reason: strengthening our education system.
Everyone, irrespective of his or her beginnings, whether you are born with different airboard, or you are displaced for some time, or you are born rural like me and many others, you have the opportunity to learn and prosper. And so inclusion is part of the DNA of the foundation. And this is really what grounds our strategies on. Young Africa Works, our strategy in Africa, is about enabling young people into dignified and fulfilling work, starting with them where they are. And we've set an ambitious goal of 30 million young people in dignified and fulfilling work by 2030, especially young women.
For women, I see digital skills to be our bridge to financial independence. I know a lot of women have been wired to think that tech is too hard, but I strongly believe that this is one of the areas where success is based on your skill rather than gender or location.
The evidence that is out there is that even though you have these girls in school, participating, attaining, and all of that, when it comes to the world of work, it speaks to a different story.
Holistic education plus digital skills equals employment. And so if we take out digital skills from the holistic education which we are practicing, our learners in the future in the formal sector would not have enough jobs to do.
How do you use digital technologies to create solutions to solve problems? And with that, we know that it requires devices in terms of computers in schools and looking at the secondary level and higher education levels.
In Ghana's situation, it's not only about developing or deploying the infrastructure. We have other limitations, and the major one among them is connectivity, both internet and also power.
Our partner, the World Bank, in partnership with MasterCard Foundation, is developing a digital skills provision report across sub-Saharan Africa and what must change to better connect education and employment. It reviews how primary, secondary, and tertiary education systems are responding to the rising demand of digital skills. It acknowledges the growing role of non-formal education, such as boot camps, certifications, and online trainings as alternative pathways.
In the face of Africa's growing youth population, investing in secondary education is an urgent imperative, but it's also an exciting window of opportunity that we all need to leverage. Africa's young people are not just the future of this continent, they are the present. And what the Foundation continues to hear from young people is that they are ready. They're ready to learn, to build, to lead, and to drive inclusive and sustainable growth.
What does it take to transform secondary education systems?
System-wide approach, clear vision, data, and accountability. It's not difficult. And I think if we did those things across the board, we'd start to see changes like we've seen in Ghana.
No education system can be better than the quality of the teacher. The quality of a class, the quality of learning is the quality of the teacher.
So probably most importantly is ensuring that young people have the ability to learn as part of their education, and that they can be adaptable and resilient learners.
How do we actually ensure that we are connected, as you were saying?
How are we going to be helping the school system to be able to prepare them for those specific skills, and how will these skills be assessed?
Instead of having the teachers do this in their schools, why not link the students to learnership opportunities during their term breaks? So whilst they're on vacation, they have a week, 4 weeks, 5 weeks to just go and job shadow.
We must open flexible learning pathways for those who were left behind by conflict, poverty, or displacement. Every learner, regardless of circumstance, deserves a pathway back to education and dignity.
We tell a story of resilience, the type of resilience that sits within the spirits of the young African people who are in this room. We tell the stories of how the policies that you perhaps sat in rooms like this 10 years ago to deliberate have impacted our lives positively. Free education, access to opportunity, scholarship opportunities that have enabled us to get here. We urge you to not give up on this conversation.
Let's continue to partner with education. Let's continue to be united as Africa. And let's make use of this wagon that we have created, ADEA, to bring us together as Africa so that we change the education landscape of Africa and we become one. And we lift one another as we grow forward. To make inputs in your different countries, and let's not look down upon the work of Africa. Let's take the work that has been manufactured at home in Africa, brewed at home, and make it our own, and own it and run with it.
Those were the key moments from the ADEA Triennale 2025. Big commitments on the table. Beyond those commitments, We are looking at Ghana as the host country for this year's Triennale, and we wanted to find out what Ghana is doing to invest in education, the technologies being prioritized, the teacher training, as well as prioritization on inclusion and equity. We have a sit down with Honorable Haruna Idrisu, the Minister of Education here in Ghana. Throughout 2025, we have focused on 10 recommendations from an EdTech conference that we had in 2024 and what it's going to take for Africa's education ecosystems to thrive with technology at the back of it all. And we are told that Ghana has made some strides in making sure they incorporate, or you incorporate, technology in education at all levels of education. And that's pretty much why we're here to have this conversation. So from your perspective, what does it take for a ministry to move from being a regulator to being a true champion of EdTech?
It requires government and the ministry to be deliberate about its policy interventions in celebrating EdTech and recognizing that AI holds a key to the future and that artificial intelligence will necessarily change the way we learn, the way we teach, impact on learners, impact on teachers. We need to build new capacities of teachers. And then with EdTech, it's become the future of education cannot depend on the old ways of providing education. We would need what you call a technical backbone, one of infrastructure, two, hardware and software, and three, policy, and whether we are guided by data-driven evidence in the decisions that we take in the provision of inclusive, equitable, quality education. So Ghana, we are moving proactively to invest in digital education, from kindergarten to primary school to junior high school and to senior high school. We are accelerating and increasing investment in digital technology. We have what we call the One Laptop Initiative, which provided for some teachers to have access to a laptop, and then also one laptop per student at the level of the senior high school. That is also part of our effort collectively to mainstream digitalization into education provision. But I should be quick to admit that not all our educational institutions are digital ready. There are many schools in the rural areas that do not have connectivity, even to electricity, let alone talk about internet broadband connectivity. And then the access to the hardware and software of a laptop or an equipment to guide this. But government is investing, as I have said, and into the next couple of years, we intend to invest more in the provision of digital education and to establish a framework of EdTech. And Ghana already has a policy and a strategy to do that. What we need is to implement and police it well so that the needed benefits are gained.
I like that. And the fact that you're honest enough to admit that not all institutions are digitally ready, that there is really something very profound. But how can continental platforms like, say, ADEA, or the Association of the Development of Education in Africa, and the conversations that we have been hosting and are yet to host on shaping the future of education, helping to ensure that no country is left behind?
In Ghana, we cherish our partnership with MasterCard Foundation, TTEL, and ADEA. And that's why we are proudly hosting the ADEA conference, which is looking at the future of education and strengthening and providing for the opportunities that will ensure, as I said, improved learning outcomes. So in Ghana, we are working with many of these partners, one, to expand access, two, to improve inclusivity, and then three, to drive it digitally. And as I admitted earlier, our infrastructure needs major overhaul in order that we take advantage of a rapid technologically changing world. Artificial intelligence, my fear is at two levels. One, is not likely to produce lazy students. That's one of the threats of a transition to artificial intelligence. The other would be about the preservation and security of data. How secured will be the data that we'll be using, particularly at the early stages in the provision of education. So a few ethical challenges would need to be addressed. But in Africa, and particularly using the Ghanaian example, I know it's about the same in Sierra Leone, in Gambia, and in Zambia. There is a sharp dichotomy in the provision of quality education between urban-rural and rural-urban. And in Ghana too, even in terms of digital access, the quality varies from public-private. I mean, private institutions are able to provide, and many public schools, maybe because of the huge numbers, are not able to adequately provide for that. That disparity is part of Africa's learning crisis. We would need to work to address it, and we should not repeat the same as we transit into a digital provision of equitable, inclusive, quality education. Right?
Africa is not short of data, but we are short of how to utilize this data and help it or allow it to help us make informed decisions about our education ecosystems. How are you leveraging the current data systems that you have today?
Ours is based on the principle of no child should be left behind. As I indicated, we are partnering with ADEA. We have the dashboard, which we have introduced. We also have Senlos, which we have introduced in Ghana. And all of them are looking at the digital provision of education. The problem in Ghana would be processing the data for the public good. And there are just too many silos of data, uncoordinated. And what we need is to harmonize the data and to make the best use of it.
Right. When you say siloed data, how are you, as the Minister of Education, making sure that this data is not siloed and that it's being put to good use?
We had a National Education Forum to do an evaluation of our education provision in the last few decades and to know what the challenges are and to accept that there is a global crisis in the provision of equitable quality education. There are gender disparities in terms of access to education, and there is a missing link of the skills TVET gap. Not too many of our own are able to benefit from technical skills. So all of it is to process the data and make the best use of it, but it should be evidence-based.
Part of the recommendations of the MasterCard Foundation EdTech Conference emphasized investment in digital infrastructure or foundational infrastructure, things like electricity, like connectivity and devices as non-negotiables. Where has Ghana seen progress, and what is the role of public-private partnerships in making sure this happens?
We have a Public-Private Partnership Act, which is to regulate legally the relationship between the state, the government, and the private sector in providing for infrastructure, not necessarily in education. This was largely focused on roads and probably healthcare, but there's an opportunity in the education stream for public partnership investment, especially at the higher education level, in order that we can expand access to higher education. So in Ghana, we do have a Public-Private Partnership Act, Build, Operate, Transfer, and then Build, Operate. We haven't subjected it to a major implementation test, but probably in the provision of infrastructure in the schools, we could leverage on it. The state dominates when it comes to the provision of education in Ghana. Tuition at all levels remain free. Teachers are paid for by the state and government. The state again invests in infrastructure provision by way of classroom, dormitories, lecture theater, and then the EdTech aids. But in terms of connectivity, there are still schools in Ghana that are under trace. We need to respond and respond urgently into dealing with that. Ghana's Constitution of 1992 imposed an onerous constitutional burden on the country working to achieve free compulsory universal basic education. 30 years into it, we have not attained free compulsory universal basic education. I'm reliably informed that our literacy rate is around 79% compared to South Korea peers, which is 98%, with a per capita income of about 30,000 US dollars compared to Ghana 2,500. So when it comes to the provision of education infrastructure, one, many schools were built without electricity connection. Many of our institutions are without internet connectivity. Again, rural Ghana. How do you deploy an internet infrastructure into a non-existent school where there's no classroom? You don't want a situation where learners are in school but not learning. Want to depart from the phenomena where you have learners going to school but not learning. And it will mean that we have to work to improve the school environment, to make it EdTech friendly. It should be education technology friendly. That is the kind of institutions we should build. So now when you are building an educational, a school structure, provide for electricity. When you are building a school structure, provide for internet connectivity. You can call it a last mile in order that they can have access to broadband connectivity, because they would need that in order to make use of artificial intelligence.
Let's talk about equity and inclusion. You have already mentioned, the challenge of classrooms or non-existent classrooms in certain parts of Ghana. And the same would apply to the number of girls versus boys going into school. I wanted to hear your thoughts around inclusivity for education where young girls are concerned, because around the continent, there's still a number of young girls who are excluded from the education ecosystem due to different reasons, like cultural norms and other vices that you could mention. But what practical steps is Ghana taking to make sure that there's equal access to education for not just the boy child, but also for the girls who continue to be left out? How intentional are you in making sure that it's incorporated into things like your EdTech strategy, for example?
I think that in Ghana, throughout history, we've always emphasized girls' education. Growing up with the notion that if you educated a girl, you educated a nation. And if you educated a man, you educated an individual. And for us in Ghana, we've also said that knowledge is like a baobab tree. You can't embrace it alone as an individual. And therefore, what is important is yes, there are disparities, but there are more girls in school now than before. As part of the deliberate actions of government, we intend even setting up a STEM or a science resource center in northern Ghana to serve the other half of the country. We have a similar facility already in Accra. We also are promoting girls in ICT, and we intend to expand infrastructure in about 10 schools, which will have dedicated ICT infrastructure for girls. One of the factors culturally that contributed to absenteeism and probably the dropout of young girls was the management of menstrual cycle and associated cause, and the inability of parents and students to bear it. So we've initiated what we call the free sanitary pad distribution, and we're upscaling it from the senior high school to the junior high school to lift the burden of the parent and the student in order that they can get focused and steady. We believe that that will contribute to some stability and a seamless learning for those young girls. We also are, as I said, encouraging girls in science, mathematics, and STEM. We note that young girls are not too enthused about technical and vocational education. So I'm encouraging some study to find out the why are young girls not interested in TVET, technical and vocational education, and what is it that we can do to whet their appetite to want to do that, particularly those who have hand skills, that gives them ready jobs. So yes, disparities exist, and in terms of access, we have inclusive policies. In fact, Ghana has passed even an affirmative action law to encourage more female participation in our decision making at all levels of government. And we have dedicated girls' school. So what we need to do is to expand more of it, to build more of the girls' school, just expand their infrastructure by way of dormitories and then lecture halls and the ICT facility. So in Ghana, we're embracing EdTech very well, and we intend to use that to leverage on the provision of artificial intelligence and ICT joint.
How are you addressing the need for devices for teachers so they can cascade information?
I think the previous government launched the one laptop per teacher. Yeah. We will expand that. And for me, there was also an initiative for free secondary education. I'm trying to do that for junior high school. But again, infrastructure for many junior high school are in very worrying structures. And we need to build more of that. So we have to generally invest in infrastructure provision in Ghana in order to expand access. Then we can, within the framework of our EdTech framework, we can mainstream ICT into education provision.
What would you want to have achieved for you to actually say you have done an incredible job as Minister of Education for Ghana?
That I would have contributed sowing the seeds and to Ghana's quest in attaining quality, equitable, inclusive education where no child or learner is left behind in terms of access to any digital education tool. There are no schools under trace under my watch, and that every rural community in Ghana can boast of at least a basic education infrastructure. We are able to improve the quality of education generally, and we go beyond text literacy and numeracy into character building, and that we are shaping minds, critical, analytical minds that can contribute to problem solving with more investment in science, mathematics, and engineering education. So overall, expanded access to quality education.
Why don't you leverage public-private partnerships to do this?
It's not a popular initiative for education provision in Ghana. Every Ghanaian grows to believe to be dependent on the state. So the state provide me quality education. So even if the state is struggling, expanded access to quality education and take full advantage of a fast-changing world that learners can live their world. I like the example when you are using a child mother and telephone. When you get home and your daughter wants to have access to your phone, you know what she's telling you? That is their world. And their world is about a digital future. We cannot afford to leave them behind. And therefore, we must make sure that every school is connected, taking advantage of EdTech and AI technology to drive education provision. And I've always accepted that reality, that AI will shape the way we learn and the way we teach.
Well, we've heard from the Honorable Minister about Ghana's education strategy, but what does this translate to in practice? Let's hear from the industry players. How do we ensure education is affordable, inclusive on the African continent?
When education is affordable, inclusive, it means each and every child will be able to attend education. One of the ways of making it affordable is by creating public-private partnership. Governments on their own may not be able to achieve that. But when the governments come together with the private sector, with all those that are into the education space, they will subsidize education. They will make a contribution. And once education is subsidized, once the costs go down, then it will be all inclusive. It will enable many more children to get into school and complete the education cycle. The second way of looking at it is about the policies. What policy frameworks do the governments have? What is it that has been put in place to ensure that education is affordable, to ensure that there is investment in education? Once governments invest in education, once the policies are the right policies and they are implemented, then education will be inclusive because it will be affordable by all.
How is FAWE leveraging technology to increase access to education?
FAWE, like many other organizations, are leveraging on technology. And why we leverage on technology is because it will reach a wider public, a wider community. And how we are leveraging it as a FAWE is by ensuring in all our programs that we are designing, education-related programs, we are training girls in terms of how to use technology. We are promoting STEM and IT among the girls. And as we promote that, we're ensuring that all of them are able to do research. They're able to learn. For instance, during COVID, they were able to continue learning because we had to provide them with smartphones. We had to provide them with internet access. And because of that, they were able to continue learning.
What do you think we need to prioritize to make sure that more girls are accessing education, especially in a world that is driven by technology in education?
Make sure that the girls are part of the whole decision making. They are part of the curriculum development. They contribute to it because they know what they want. They know what happens in that space, and they should be able to contribute. And the other one is looking at curriculum. How does the curriculum embed technology in it so that they are not only learning it in different spaces, not only in school, but how they continue learning it even outside school, even right at their homes.
What do you make of the EdTech innovations today in Africa in terms of them being all-inclusive?
I think that our challenge is that we need Africa-founded EdTech companies. And I deliberately referenced the mobile telephony evolution, or shall I say revolution, as an example of how Africans, below the radar, behind the scenes, have been, through young people that is, constructing these fascinating apps and building cybersecurity into it, building social safety into these social networks. So we've got that asset. And that asset must be mobilized so that we draw on peers from across the world, but we also have our own authentic technologies that we can map into EdTech and that can, as you are suggesting, create possibilities for young people to build assets for the future.
Why is there resistance to embrace African-led EdTech innovations to build resilient education ecosystems in Africa?
I think the reluctance has to do with an absence of confidence. It is an intergenerational phenomenon. And I do think that you're right on point there. How do we energize, dynamize our teachers and school principals and universities? How do we dynamize them? My own experience as a university leader in South Africa was to mobilize champions. And so that meant at the University of Johannesburg, what we would do is we would call a gathering and we will see who pitch up amongst the academics, right? And those typically would be the ones who would be the first movers. And so we brought in EdTech companies to work with them to improve their capabilities so that it's not just a sham or a light touch use of technology. It's deep use of a range of technologies, right? So that they are able to connect more deliberately with young people who are steps ahead of us, right? If not miles ahead. And so I think that we can be more deliberate by mobilizing champions, supporting champions at school level, primary, high school, university, and college level. And I think that is my call to action.
What do we need to do to build confidence of educators for the use of EdTech across Africa?
The best experience I have is show and tell. So who does the showing and telling? It's teachers themselves. It's teachers who have been at or are now at the cutting edge of EdTech in the classroom, so to speak. And by the way, EdTech not in the classroom only, outside the classroom as well. And so when we showcase these role models, again, more deliberately, and not just showcase them, help them to become interlocutors in that space of reluctance and absence of confidence, so that they are able to help these teachers of ours row their way out of traditional teaching and learning and into this new vista of possibilities.
What's your assessment of Africa's education ecosystem?
Well, it's a mixed grill. So we had entered the millennium with everyone, worried about universal access to education. And so when we had the Millennium Development Goals, it was practically the second thing on that after the poverty goal. And in that period, so much effort went into universalizing access. And so Africa did well relatively compared to many other targets. So on access, I would say not bad. We need to get more children into school. But that's where it ends, because this data that tells you that children are in school, but they're not learning, it means that schooling is not learning. And therefore, we must bridge that gap and do it quickly.
I want to hear your thoughts around technology in education. Where do you think the gaps are really?
I think there are huge gaps. When you think in terms of what we're trying to solve for. We're trying to solve for people learning and being productive, right? And, when you think how so little in terms of teacher learning materials we have available, it's a critical factor for success in the learning agenda. When you think in terms of the number of teachers and their capacity to teach with methods that are sensible. So whether it's the teacher guide, translating the curriculum to teacher guide, from the teacher guide to lesson plans, to the classroom assessment, technology is very relevant in all of the elements of structured pedagogy, which is what we campaign for, that, if you can build structure around the way that things happen within the classroom system, and even at the level of the macro of the administration, the organizing of that whole learning, schooling agenda, then you would be able to achieve things at scale, right? So to achieve things at scale, the thing we know most makes that happen is technology.
As we progress in Africa, there's quite a lot of work that needs to be done. What are the recommendations you have for building resilience in our education systems?
One major reason that a lot of even good ideas that worked didn't go far was the political fluidity that we have on our continent. One set of people are in power today, they love the idea, they move with it. Another set of people come tomorrow and they simply say, no, I don't care about the idea. So the politics means that for you to build resilience, we need to take away the power that the politicians have to be the ones determining whether something survives or does not survive. We need to move it to the citizens. So the demand side for the things that work, we have to nurture it into existence. We need to think of things from the lenses of these emergent issues that create a lot of instability, uncertainty, and sometimes just absolute anxiety. Those are part of ways of ensuring that resilience happens. Above all, let's just get more children educated. The more that we have productive Africans, the more resilient Africa will be.
EdTech innovators across Africa are coming up with solutions that can be embedded in our curricula. One of the challenges we are experiencing is the fact that there's slow adoption of these technologies in our education ecosystems. So where is the challenge? What do these EdTech innovators need to do better? How do we create a synergy between them and the policymakers and implementers? Let's hear from these innovators themselves.
If I were to redesign education with technology, the first thing I would change is digital infrastructure, the availability and access to digital infrastructure in our schools and then in our communities. Because even the best of edtechs, the adoption and use of the best of edtechs are hindered by the lack of digital infrastructure. Impact for us would look like providing teachers with Ghanaian tools that enable them quickly get through all these administrative tasks that are taking their time, which they can then spend in class on quality engagement of their learners. And we are not just saving them time, we are also enabling them implement the new curriculum. And then when we are introducing them to the Jessie AI tool, we have a whole technical team on ground helping them navigate their way around, whether it's a computer they are using, whether it's a phone, whether it's a tablet. And then before introducing them to Jessie AI, we give them a general overview and understanding of AI. So we would say that's our way of checking the fear or intimidation that comes with, I'm not tech savvy, how do I leverage these tools in my classroom? We don't just leave them out there. We check that fear first before introducing them to the tool.
Talking about EdTech, teachers will first need the resources. And that's the major thing. If they have the resource, then they are able to go through it. But now, getting the resource without knowledge about how to use them becomes another challenge. And so they will need the technical know-how. That will call for training. But what we do to support ours is that, yes, after giving them the training, we also have what we call the Smart Coach Champions. And so the Smart Coach Champions would help them to develop their skill in using the Smart Coach app as we use. With our app, what we try to do is that as we begin with our learners, we do the diagnostic assessment. And so we expect learners to be at a certain standard before they do the basic one activities and move on. But what we realized was that after the diagnostic, we are able to identify low readers. And so based on that, we are able to pick up those who are not performing as expected. And so when the intervention begins to roll, at the end of the term, then we do an ORF assessment again, and then that helps us to track the progress that the learner is making. So those who lag behind, we do remediation activities for them. And so if we get to our teacher's guide, at the end of each week, there is an assessment. Those who are not able to perform are given remediation. Those who do so well, they also continue with the work as is expected of them. And so we identify them and we give them the support. If it had not been for the app, we might not be able to identify, because this one helps us to do a one-on-one assessment. In a normal sense, the students may be together to do an assessment. They may copy from their friends, and so you wouldn't know the exact capability of the learner. But where they do the one-on-one oral reading fluency test, it helps us to identify them as individuals, and so the support can be provided.
Data is essential for tracking progress. Beyond data, the intentionality around the investment of technology as an enabler is pivotal in building resilient education ecosystems to make sure that those beyond the tarmac, learners with disabilities, refugees and displaced persons are not left behind. There's so many lessons we can take from Ghana that can be cascaded across the African continent. And these are some of the lessons we would like to carry and intentionally invest in our education ecosystems. But will our leaders do this for us? Thank you all for joining us on this edition of EdTech Mondays Africa. It's been a special edition and pretty much the sum up of this season of EdTech Mondays Africa. We look forward to joining you and you joining us on the new season of EdTech Mondays Africa. My name is Joy Doreen Bira. Thank you all for joining us throughout this season.